Devlin, you're doing the meeting tonight for us? Okay.
Carrie and I together are gonna pull everything together.
Is everybody here then?
We're just missing Jean and Nanette.
Okay, so Jean Jean won't be able to attend as far as I know.
Okay, and Aaron told me he won't be here.
And Aaron won't be here? Okay. And Nanette? We're just waiting for Nanette.
Correct.
Okay. Good, okay. Well, give her 3 more minutes. And we've got, okay. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody, from our home bases. Open the final meeting of Heritage Center Wellington in the year 2020, for the year 2020. I'm sure we're all happy to get to this point. Anyway, I'll start with the disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. And I'm just going to open my screen. Does anybody have any conflicts they want to declare? Okay, if we're all good there, then confirmation of the agenda for this evening. Has everyone had a chance to look at it? And are we in agreement? Okay, by consensus then, I believe. We can move on to approval of the minutes from October 13th, 2020. Go ahead, Nancy.
I was just gonna say, I move the minutes be approved.
Okay, and all in favor of that? Okay, and that's motion then is carried. Do we need a seconder for that, Devlin? Sorry.
It's by consensus, so
By
you're
consensus. Okay.
I wasn't
Sorry.
present, so I suppose I'll have to abstain. Is that how it works?
Sorry, Nico, say again.
I wasn't present at the last meeting.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I guess you would abstain then, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And we have, do we have Beverly? Is she checked in? I'm just gonna open, I don't have my full screen on here.
Yeah, she's
Okay, hi Beverly.
Yes.
Glad you're able to join us this evening. Okay, so I think Beverly Cairns has approached us, the Heritage Center Wellington, with the concept of a project to honor John Connon and his photographic images and his photography and some of his innovations in photography. And he was a fairly prominent person in Elora at the turn of the last century. And so that's, we invited Beverly to come and speak with us this evening about what it is that she would like to proposed that Heritage Center Wellington partner with the Elora Arts Council on a project. So perhaps rather than trying to paraphrase it anymore, I'll just turn it over to Beverly then. And she can explain, go through that. There was some information Devlin sent out as well earlier today, just in support of this. So, okay, go ahead, Beverly. Just unmute your mic. Lower left.
Okay,
There you go. Oh,
okay, yeah. I'm Beverly Cairns. I am one of the founders of the Elora Arts Council in 1985, and I have been a board member ever since. I'm also the representative of the Architectural Conservancy Ontario in this area. Before I get into the exact thing I'm talking about tonight, I'd like to convey a couple of other projects to you, which is that the Ken Hewitt book of the Visitor's Guide to the Elora Gorge is going forward and will be being sent to the to Wilfrid Laurier Press by Christmas. And that's very good news for us all. It'll take some time to go through, but that will be a crucial book for for this area, I think. Secondly, the Architectural Conservancy, as well as the Elora Arts Council, want to feature the Connons in the window that we control of Greg Oak's window in Elora and another window in Fergus during the month of February, which we think of more as the Heritage Month rather than Heritage Day. Heritage Day follows in that month, but we would like to try to expand that month further. And I think if Heritage Center Wellington can help to push that forward, that would be very good. So let me get on to just this project, which is Cultural Days. This project came to me through the municipality, through the cultural person, Mr. Shawan, and came to the Elora Arts Council. And we feel it has a very broad basis in the community. It's really amazing because it hits on not only photography, which is like an art, innovation, it's history, it's also heritage. And so it has an amazing base. Tomorrow at 10:30, I will be speaking to the manager of this project, and I will scope it out further. The project is to take place between late September and late October. But it begins in April, and I don't quite understand how that works. I'll know further tomorrow. But it seems to be fairly high on their list. And I think if you've seen the budget that we laid out, it lays out in Victoria Park some double-sided signage boards, which would have pictures and history of the Thomas and John Connon, father and son, who were exceptional people here. And I think I don't have to give you much of the background because I put it on there, except that they were innovators in the panoramic camera, also the camera roll, which was taken up by Kodak, and numbers of other innovations in photography, which is of course very popular today with tourists and everyone. Our choice of the space is, I live nearby and I know how many tourists go by there, even at this time of the year. But it's also, if COVID continues, it's an outdoor exhibit area, which will be okay. I had originally thought that this signage would be temporary, but in speaking to Deb Dalziel at the tourist center, she saw them as a much more permanent thing. She said that she sent me 7 sites where she thought they could be brought around to, and they could also be kept through tourism. And so they would go to the Scottish Festival or to museum sites, et cetera, as permanent displays. And she emphasized to me how important it is to tourists in this area to see something of the depth of our background here. And she was hugely enthusiastic. So I don't have too much time of my 5 minutes to speak to you, but my particular appeal to Heritage Center Wellington is, first, I would like to be able to say that you support this project. Secondly, there is a line in for $3,000 in my budget outline, which is for an Ontario Trust bronze plaque to the Connons, father and son. These plaques cost $5,000 and they need community input. They're like, if you're familiar with the one for Boyle out in front of the Elora Library, that's the sort of thing that we're envisioning. We feel that the Connons have not really been given proper acclaim in our community because they were very original, they were very historic, they recorded our time here. So that what I would like Heritage Center Wellington to also contemplate would be supplementing this income, which I have contribution of $3,000. That would be a further $2,000. I mean, if you can't manage that all in your budget, we would have to find it somewhere else in the community to get this put up. So I'll just mention where the Connons had their shops, etc. One was on the corner of Moore and Davis Street in Elora, and they also had places on Mill Street. One right by the bridge, on the west side of the bridge, and then next to it, the building next to it. So a plaque could be put in either of these places, but I think that would be up to Heritage Center Wellington to find the wording, etc., and to engage with that with the support of the rest of the community. Any questions about it?
Thank you very much, Gloria. Beverly, I'm sorry, apologize. That's great. And if there's anything else you wanted to add, please go ahead. But I think it's probably a good time to go ahead and let the committee ask you a few questions
Right.
about, and that's, it would be about the nature of the involvement or in general. About,
Yes, I saw this as the education committee of HCW. This is a particularly educational thing for the public, for tourism, for general public, in fact. And we don't have any other recognition, general public recognition to say that these people have been so valued in our community. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions then for Beverly?
If nobody else has any, I just wanted to ask Beverly, thanks for your presentation. Do you have a timeline, like a deadline by when you would need to know where the funding is coming from and when you'd want a response by?
When I speak to Megan, who is the manager of this cultural of this project, I will know more tomorrow.
And sorry, where Megan is with
She's
which?
in Ontario. She's a representative from the province for cultural days. They've
Okay,
extended their cultural days to a month now. And I sent you some of the background of that. I'm kind of not exactly certain where we fit in here, but they seem to think that we have a good project. And I could tell you more after I speak with her. But what I would like to be able to say to her is that, Heritage Center Wellington is generally supportive of this project. And I know tourism, TCW is supportive, and other groups. That's who I reach out, because it does say that it's important that you have community support.
and is that something you're hoping to have for your meeting tomorrow?
Yes, I would
So
like.
you'd like some kind of endorsement from this committee?
Right, to say
Okay.
that I think that would be good. You don't have to make an endorsement for this particular plaque or anything tonight. That's not, we'll see how that goes forward. And that may be a kind of a more long-term type of thing, going through if it could be initiated at the time of Culture Days in the fall, that would be a great thing.
So I think it would be helpful if after you meet with her tomorrow, then you can provide us some additional information just in terms of timing
Absolutely.
and the opportunities for the committee to get involved. And I
Yes.
think we'd want to have a discussion with tourism as well, just to see what their involvement would be and if it could be a collaboration. And then we can decide or bring it back to the committee. And then I'll leave it to the committee now to decide about an endorsement for your
Right.
purposes for tomorrow.
Or even like the use of the park, etc. I know that, as a citizen, I can do that. But I think it's important to have the support of the municipality in doing that, because there can be maybe questions of whether what we propose is appropriate or not, et cetera,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Does the committee, can you give me some feedback on whether you feel you have enough information right now to discuss perhaps in just a general endorsement of this project? as we've heard from Beverly and based on the information that's been sent to us, sort of an endorsement in principle, or would you like to wait and get more information and then bring it back to the committee perhaps in January? So can I just get some feedback from you on what you, perhaps on this? Nico, what do you think? You're muted.
I think we can support the project in principle. However, as Mariana has pointed out, there are several more inquiries to be made in terms of who the other players would be in the project and what their contribution would be. So on a very preliminary basis and in principle, I think we can, at least my personal feeling is that we can, I think it's an excellent initiative and I think it behooves us to support it.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. You're on the education subcommittee there in communications. What do you think of it?
I was in agreement with Nico, and I was thinking as Beverly adding that this may be something similar to some of the other projects. I can't speak for Jean, but the two of us could perhaps work with tourism to, you know, support whatever the initiatives that have been approved by the committee to be, and it seems to fit within our purview or our portfolio.
Okay, good. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I was just gonna say I agree with everyone too in terms of principle. I'm really surprised that a plaque has not been made for them, because even like, you know, just to look at what we're gonna do today, when we look at the cultural heritage landscape study, their photographs are all through it. In terms
Yeah,
of
exactly.
almost every photograph we have of the 19th century gorge and Fergus and Elora region seems to come from them, that studio. So I'm really surprised that one of these Ontario Heritage Trust plaques hasn't already been placed in our community. So I can certainly see it as something to support in principle for sure.
Good, thank you. Do we need, well, how would we do that? Would this be in the form of a resolution then, Evelyn, to support this
Yeah, I
initiative?
think that would be a good idea.
Okay. So we would need some wording for a resolution to support this in principle based on, I'll let you work it out, maybe.
Beverly, what's the project called? Like, does it have an overall name, an overarching name?
Well, that's a good, it's just,
The Connon Commemoration Project, maybe? And that encompasses.
well, that's a good suggestion, yes, indeed. You'll see that actually a book is being produced by Mike Hale and Ian Rankin, which were applying for some money to support, etc. It will be a very in-depth book about the Connons. I mean, our feeling is that, you know, these people have not received proper, we need to focus on them more and celebrate them more. And this is an opportunity through this. I worked out all this with Susan Thorning, who of course works a lot with heritage things. And I think from a heritage point of view, it's very interesting for you all to know that there are people outside of the Heritage Committee who are working and interested in heritage and working to try to support heritage. Yeah, and to look for grants. And certainly the Elora Arts Council has quite a strong focus on heritage as well. And the ACO, of course, which is,
Okay, thank you, Beverly. Devlin, do you have any kind of wording for us then we might consider?
Yep, I think we can just keep it simple and say that Heritage Center Wellington supports the Connon project, commemoration project in principle.
Okay, and so we have someone who would, I guess, put that, how do we put that forward in the form of a resolution? Then we don't, do we need a seconder for that?
Need a mover as well.
And a mover? Okay. Who would like to move that? Don, I see your hand. Is that correct? Okay, so Don moves that resolution and a seconder. Nico, thank you. All in favor of that or discussion on that? Is there any discussion on the resolution? Okay, all in favor? Okay, and anybody opposed to the resolution? Okay, so looks like a unanimous support for the resolution, I believe.
that's excellent, excellent. Yes, and
Yeah.
I think we can go forward together and actually, I think this will be a benefit to tourism and also to our spirits in Central Wellington, and it will be a revelation to people what photography has become so important now, but who opened the doors of photography in the past, and I think that will be have a lot of reverberations.
Okay, well, I agree with you completely, Beverly. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. And I think it's actually quite timely considering what Don mentioned about how many of the photographs that are featured in the Cultural Heritage Landscape Study are Connon photographs. And so I think there's more than one intersection of interests here.
So let me ask you though, what is like the budget situation? Heritage Center Wellington presents a budget. What is the timing of that budget?
I think that's part of what we would discuss, and perhaps
Right.
we can try to discuss whether there's any money that we could somehow earmark from this year's budget. And I think there's Mariana and some others would perhaps, maybe Mariana, you should answer that. Go ahead.
I know that we do have some money in our budget, but it's something that I know we've dealt with this in the past, and it's not something that can typically be carried over. So if there's something we can contribute this year, I think we do have some funds available. But short of that, we'd be looking at sort of coming out of the new budget for next year if it's something that we're doing next year.
Yes, but I mean, it's timely to be able to apply for that, I think, don't you? Don't you, Mariana?
Yes, but I believe, I'm not sure when the budgeting is happening, and the clerk might have a better knowledge of that in terms of when the committee budgets are actually confirmed and approved. So, I will let her comment on that.
Okay, so don't let me miss a deadline, okay? Please advise me of a deadline if I have to apply, if we have to apply.
I know that we've already discussed budget for next year, but I just don't know when that gets approved. So,
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And I'm really delighted to have your support. It's something that the community really has needed to do for many years, and we're getting around to it. So, yeah, it's just putting a piece in place from the past to the present.
Okay, well, thank you again, Beverly.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so next item up on the agenda is action items, replacement of Bridge 4WG. We have a presentation from Colin Baker. Managing Director of Infrastructure Services. And I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. I'm assuming it's A something. Dickieson? Dickieson?
Yeah, it's Adam Dickieson. I'm
Adam.
also
I'm
in the
sorry.
Infrastructure Services Department
Yeah.
as well.
So I see we have Colin is on the screen here somewhere, and Adam as well. So perhaps I can just let you go ahead then with your presentation. And then we can have discussion about where we are with this project. Very interesting, as of course we're sort of about a year since we had these bridges before us.
Okay.
So, Colin,
So-
maybe Colin, do you want to go ahead, or Adam? You?
Actually, yeah, I think Adam's got maybe a few presentation slides to to go over, so I'll hand it over to Adam.
Okay. Welcome to you both, by the way.
Okay, thanks. And I think there's we have a guest as well, so maybe Adam, if you want to introduce.
Yeah,
our
I
guest.
thought maybe before I really got rolling here, I'd introduce myself to the group and thank you very much to Heritage Center Wellington for having us. So I'm part of the infrastructure services team with the Township of Center Wellington, working with Colin Baker. And then also in amongst us here this evening is Patrick Main. Patrick is a civil engineer with the Case Marts and Associates out of Kitchener, who's started into some of the detailed design components for the replacement of 4WG. So should there be some really technical questions that are presented later on, Patrick will be there to assist in that as well. So maybe I could just have Devlin put that slide presentation back up, and Devlin, you'll have to help me advance through these slides, but even on slide 1 here before I really get going. So the idea this evening then is before we really get our detailed designs advancing much further, we're looking for Heritage Center Wellington, as was requested by council, to be consulted with regards to a couple of sympathetic design commemorative strategies. So we've focused on a couple of areas that we feel are quite feasible that we could introduce into the design for the replacement of the structure that was selected through the environmental assessment that was conducted over the last year and then some. So Devlin, what we'll do then is I'll just go through these slides. What I have here is some visuals that can kind of help explain what's feasible and what we can potentially introduce as we further this design. So we can move into the next slide for me. So just a reminder to the group as far as where this structure is located in relationship to Fergus and Bellwood and the lake. It's just south of Bellwood Lake there on the 5th line of what used to be West Carefraxa Township. And the next slide, please. So through the environmental assessment report, we've got the 3 kind of different pieces that we're going to be discussing. So it's known that the full replacement of the bridge is going to be one of the outcomes through this process, and we're looking at introducing into the new structure some perhaps some concrete cast in place precast components that would help commemorate what used to stand in that place. And second to that would be a bronze plaque of some description. And finally, we're able to provide a full recording of the documentation of what did exist prior to this bridge's retirement and where it came from, and the story behind it has been produced through a cultural heritage report. So we'll have that we can file and turn into our archives as well. Next slide, please, Devin. So there's lots of different ways that this component that I had mentioned about, providing some kind of appearance in the concrete to make it a little more memorable. And what I've selected here was these are just samples of what's being done out there in different areas of Ontario. I'm not suggesting that any of these images are maybe suitable for what we're looking at, but just some of the things that are done elsewhere in the province. These 4 images are found on some 407 structures. This type of image that was cast into the concrete would have been done off-site and delivered to the bridge site and then attached to the structure, just as a sample. And next slide, please, Devlin. Along the same lines, these were also involved in the same project in that 400 series 407 project to kind of bring out some of the local cultural aspects that were present near these few structures. There was quite a presence of, they had a number of different architectural digs with the knowledge that there was quite an Indigenous history in that area, and it's represented in some of these types of impressions in the concrete in that instance. Next slide, please. Now this is a little closer to home. This was a very simple kind of impression that was introduced into a structure just last year that K Smart's part of Pat Main's team had introduced. It's hard to kind of appreciate what's going on here, but there was a removal of a metal truss bridge, and as part of its memorialization, they introduced some impressions in the concrete of the new structure to help commemorate and remind the public of what was in that particular crossing prior to its replacement. Next slide, please. And so right close to home here in Fergus, as most of you will be very much aware, the St. David Street Bridge was replaced in recent time, 2018. And part of that was to commemorate the arch that was there 2 bridges ago when that was a bowstring arch crossing on that river crossing of the Grand. And we were quite pleased with how that form of commemoration turned out. And in that particular set of circumstances, that impression faces upstream and downstream that can be appreciated by visitors when they're walking in and around the replacement structure. So next slide, please. And then just to give the members of the committee a bit of an idea of what types of things have been done in the past when it comes to a commemorative plaque. Here's a couple of samples that have been placed on area structures in recent time again, and it incorporates, a name, former name of the structure, and potentially, a bit of information, and of course the logo and that sort of thing. Typically these plaques have been around 16 inches. across and 16 inches high is what's been typically used. And next slide, Devlin, please. There's with regards to the plaque, again, there's a couple different ways that it can be handled. It could be on a pedestal or inset right into the concrete structure itself. We're convinced in this particular circumstance with this structure replacement that the style that to be inset would maybe be preferred based on the fact that in this particular location where this bridge is to be replaced, it'll be difficult to find a safe place to take in the pedestal sign. There's no good place to stand nearby on that particular roadway. So the preferred might be the inset style. It's a little harder for the public to tamper with and things of that nature as well. And then next slide, please. And then just a reminder back to the documentation that we have. The history of this particular structure is incorporated into the Cultural Heritage Report. Currently, it's made available online through our Center Wellington's webpage. It can be easily accessed by the public. It's a couple clicks away. Just in this slide, I'm showing you that you proceed to the Connect CW button, and then once in that area, you can gain access to the reports that are associated with this particular structure. And it's a very detailed report and speaks to a lot of the heritage of this bridge and how it came into being. So that I believe brings us to the end of the images that I brought along, just to help the group kind of focus on what it is that we're interested in discussing. Looking to Heritage Center Wellington to provide us with potentially some more direction as far as what the message on plaque might be, and potentially what type of impression might serve for the replacement of this structure. One thing I wanted to make mention of and consideration to the group would be if there's a interest from the group to have the impression in the concrete, that perhaps in this circumstance it would be on the interior of the bridge, that vehicles and those that walk will cross the bridge when it's replaced will be able to appreciate. It's less likely that introducing that on the exterior will be able to be appreciated the same way by visitors to the site after it's been replaced. So those are the key things that I wanted to speak to this evening. And if perhaps there's some questions from the group, I'd be available to answer them, and maybe some of my colleagues here would assist if it's kind of beyond my understanding.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Adam. Colin, do you have anything to add now, or should you just you are here as support, as is Pat?
Yeah, we're here to support. So yeah, I think we'll open up to questions if that's okay.
All right. Well, this is something that the committee's very interested in. As you know, we actually brought a motion to council, or a recommendation that these bridges should be designated last year, and for a number of different reasons. And then that motion, of course, was not approved by the council. And that is where subsequently we were asked to have our input and our back into the design bridges. And of course, these are significant bridges from the heritage point of view. So I think the designs component here is important, as is the commemoration. So I'd open it up for our committee members to perhaps comment and ask questions and give us some indication then where each of you stand on the design and your thoughts on it. Perhaps, I don't want to pick on Nico here, maybe Don, how about you go ahead and give us your thoughts on this?
In terms of the size of the bridge, I think the bronze plaque is probably what I would see at first, would probably be the most appropriate. But in addition to that, I know that we've been kind of discussing it as a committee, that we've been wondering if we should have some sort of a symbol of the bowstring bridges, because there seems to be a lot of them that we're replacing. And I know that we were thinking of some sort of a standard, maybe symbol or shape would be probably, that's for another time maybe to talk about that. But to start off with, I think
that's, if that's something you want to bring up, I think now would be the time to do it. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Mariana.
Yeah.
No, I think that's what they're looking for in terms of that type of input. And if you're looking at some kind of commemoration in terms of the bowstring, is there a standard approach? And I guess that's a question for Colin or Adam. Is there a sort of a standard that we could use for all the bowstrings that are being replaced? Or is it something that's more appropriate to do on an individual basis? I don't know if the design, like the one we did on the St. David Street Bridge, had a certain number of vertical elements to it, and if that is representative of what the actual bridge had, and if that's something that's appropriate, and maybe they could comment on that. But it's definitely, now's the time to bring forward all these types of suggestions, I would say.
Sorry to interrupt you, Don. I just didn't want to. Yeah, go ahead.
And I just know from earlier discussions, we were thinking of maybe a standard type of one, and I'm not sure in this case. I sort of like the one at St. David Street Bridge. I've read it quite a few times and looked at it as I walk by, and the scale model idea of the actual bridge is a nice option. However, this bridge it's quite a small bridge, is it not? Isn't what is it?
Yeah.
7 meters or so? Yeah. So I'm not sure what the profile of it would actually look like, and that's why I'm sort of two minds. I'm wondering if we should have a kind of standard bowstring bridge type of image that we use on all of them, or whether or not we want to be unique for every single bridge. That would also be another option to consider, of going in one way to be unique, to have a profile of each of these bridges, the actual bridges themselves, or do we want to look at a general bowstring image? Kind of just putting that out there.
Yeah, my thinking, goes a little beyond that. I'm not sure how well this shows up here, but I'm just wondering if something in terms of a actual precast concrete that actually would stick up above the line of the railing, so that we would actually see that, yes, there was a bowstring there. So I'm not sure if you see what I'm saying, but it might just be slightly, creating an arch, a small arch, non-structural, of course, that would be poured into the railing construction. And then that would allow the impression or the relief of the arch to actually create an arch. I think
beyond St. David Street, where it's below the line. Yeah, so I see what you're saying. So actually build it right into the.
Yeah, so I think that's what I was thinking is, and then if that could be standardized for any of the bowstrings that get replaced.
I see where yeah, we haven't discussed this at length, and I think that's something worthy of.
Anyway,
I see what you're saying with that.
I can see the engineers all,
Yeah, I know.
you guys are all of a sudden, I can see you're all looking out.
I think Nancy wants to say.
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
No, I just had a question because in the report, it talks about reproduction versus replacement. So I'm just curious, like right now it's single lane. Is it still going to be single lane and look like it is in the picture of that provided in the report? Because in my knowledge base, reproduction is pretty much identical versus replacement. So I'm just curious as to whether or not the intent is to reproduce it as it looks there with the same of structure.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So through the EA process, it was determined that the replacement type would be a concrete rigid frame, which has a different appearance to what is currently there with the bows and that sort of thing. Structurally, it behaves differently, and it's a different style of structure altogether. It has more of a rectangular type of railings as opposed to, you know, an arch that's doing the work to transfer the loads in that effect. So yeah, we're not replacing this structure with the type that it's been there as an outcome from the environmental assessment.
It'll be a full 2-lane bridge though, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it'll be a full 2-lane for safety reasons. Right now, if one of you has traveled to that site, it's a bit of a game of chicken out there in that the road narrows right at the bridge, and it is a very serious concern for safety as it stands. So we're going to rectify that.
Yeah, I would never want to be like on a bicycle crossing at the same time as somebody with a vehicle on the current one. Go ahead, Nancy. You had a question, a follow-up?
No, so I guess the intent is for the committee tonight is what kind of commemoration would we like to see on the bridge? Because pretty much everything else has been decided.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Phil.
Well, I think within the context, I'm sorry, actually, I saw Nico. Let me let Nico, you go ahead. Nico, were you going to say something? You're frozen right now.
I know Nancy had her hand up as well. There's Charlie Matani was associated with one of the 2 bridges that we had talked about. Can you recall which bridge that was? Because he's a fairly prominent local individual, and I think it would behoove us if we're going to prepare a commemoration strategy or a commemoration plaque, that if Charlie Matani is in fact associated with this particular bridge, that he be given some status as well in terms of some recognition by way of a plaque that is also embedded into the bridge, rather than simply having mention of him in a commemorative design, or sorry, in the cultural heritage evaluation report. Can anybody remember which bridge he was associated with?
My recollection is that he did both of the bridges.
That he did both of the bridges? I thought he had done one of the bridges, but I guess my point is, if he is in fact associated with this bridge, that he be given some kind of recognition aside from a simple reference within the cultural heritage evaluation report. That's one question. I have another one as well. But Nancy had her hand up. Or yeah, I'm sorry.
I did ask. Thank you
Oh.
very much, Nico. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, Sherry,
Sherry, yeah.
recognize you. Go ahead, Sherry. I think we're having a little bit of lag.
We're mute.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I like your idea, Phil, about doing like a bowstring maybe for the top of the railing. I think that's a great idea because it does commemorate the bowstring bridges that we have. And I was gonna say, just along with Nico too, like maybe we just have to go back and do some of the history on those bridges so that there is some kind of element that we put into the plaque that has strictly some information just particular about that bridge. So was there something, I don't know, when it was built, was there anything significant about it? So we could just add to it rather than just do a standard plaque. I think for just bow bridges, I'd like to see that we do a little bit of history first. And like Nico said, the gentleman that had, you know, some help with designing it or whatnot, but
Yeah, I think the intent would be the plaque would be specific to the bridge that was
Yeah.
there.
specific, but I like that bow because at least we know then any bridge they come across that has that railing was originally a bow bridge.
Yeah, I understand you have a bridge you call the Texas Bridge. And my thought would be that perhaps even spend some resources on developing something called the Wellington County Bridge, which would be have some sort of a non-structural, and I'm saying non-structural curve, would represent the arch of the bowstring, and then it could be perhaps further defined by your elevated concrete or your the relief on the concrete to define some of the finer features. But the curve would essentially be poured into the railing system, and it would be non-structural, but it would just be part of the railing. And it would represent, you know, a Wellington or a Wellington County bridge style that wherever there was a bowstring to be replaced. That's just my thought.
One thing, if I could make mention to that relief idea into the railing itself, it would have to be a structural component because of the purpose of the railing. It all has to tie into the safety of if an out of control vehicle slammed into the what we call the parapet wall, like the railing itself. So I understand.
I think what I meant,
Yeah,
Adam, was it wasn't going to do any work of supporting the bridge. Like in
Right.
terms of its, yeah, go ahead.
It'll still have to support a vehicle, if an out of control vehicle too. So it'll have to get developed if there is interest in going that direction. It'll require some engineering just to ensure that it doesn't get damaged during a collision or cause damage during a collision to a driver. All these components have to be designed in such a way to keep everybody safe in a high speed collision as well. So those are things that we look at in the replacement of a structure as well.
Well, I just wondered, I mean, my thought was that, you know, having a large, something that maybe even just rose a foot in an arch, the original, or 18 inches to create that arc shape that would be just above the railing, come up above the railing. But I understand your point. I mean, I thought about it, perhaps it would be negated because you would be concerned about it actually launching a vehicle into the air because of the curve. You know, if it got up on top of the arch or up on top of the railing. But anyway, I mean, is that something that you would be able to consider in your own deliberations and talk about? Obviously not tonight, but.
Well, I wonder if I can share my screen. I'm going to show you this type of bridge, the railing structure would be generally comprised of in its components, and how that, what you're suggesting. And I fully understand what you're suggesting and how that would be difficult to incorporate. If I hit this button here, Devlin, I should be able to share my screen. Is that correct?
Devlin, can you give us some guidance on that?
Once you hit share screen, you just have to pick the screen you'd like to share. There you go.
Okay. I'm going to try and make this a little bigger. I don't know if what you can see and how well you can see it, but typically the railings aren't very sophisticated on this replacement type of bridge. So to incorporate that arch, I'm not sure how that would go. I think we were focused a little more on providing an impression in the vertical surface of concrete, as opposed to having something project out of that vertical parapet surface that can be seen in the photograph. And again, I can't necessarily see what you folks can see. I'm kind of flying blind here. I hope you can see what I'm speaking of.
Yeah, we see the railing structure on top of the parapet structure there. And then the lead-in
right, the guide rail system as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I, you know, I can see that that's all designed, you know, with safety in mind.
Right. So the outcome with this replacement will provide the public with a greater level of safety and bring it right up to today's standards. Right now, you know, there's a number of structures that are in need of replacement or nearing the end of their service life that don't have all the safety requirements that are necessary in today's traffic requirements. So.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think, is there any other thoughts, perhaps, that any other feedback for Adam that we could give him then? Nico, go ahead. I can't see the whole screen right now, so just shout out if you want to speak.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm muted. Can people hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
fine.
In terms of this bridge that you're showing us, and Adam, and I know that you're flying blind on this, but with the railing, the concrete bridge and frame, there are, as you said, there are a number of bridges that are ending their life or in need of replacement. The bridge that you're showing us now, will that be a standardized approach for all replacement? Or will you take each bridge on its own merit in terms of design value?
Generally speaking, when we look at a replacement type, there's so many different variables that determine what structure type is going to take place or be the preferred. You know, at first glance, we were hoping that we could get a really simple structure, a concrete culvert that could be buried by earth and put some safety railings and carry on. But in this particular instance, things like the you know, storm flows have to be incorporated into the size of the opening that are underneath of it, and then as a result impact the span, which impact the railings, which impact other things. So it's kind of a whole chain of events that can occur once we start getting into the detailed design stages like we are currently. So to answer your question, I can't say that what we're looking at here in this image is the standard and the bridge that we're going to use in each instance, because there are so many different approaches, and we often try to look for the best value and best safety and longevity when we're looking for the solution. So there's just a lot of things. So to say this is what's going to be placed in every circumstance is not for certain, but there's going to be some similarities in what those that come upon the structure, you know, with the proper guide rail systems, some curbs to help drivers stay on the pavement and other factors like that. But the appearance may vary from replacement type to replacement type.
Is that basically because of what kind of traffic is used on this bridge particularly? Is that what you make your decisions on as well?
For certain right now, one of the key criteria is that if it's a single lane bridge, we look to take it into a 2-lane bridge situation. Not only can there's another level of safety there when meeting a car, even if it's not a heavily traveled roadway, but our community has a huge agricultural industry, and the equipment that they are commonly using in this day and age is very big, and we don't want that big equipment to damage the newly replaced bridge trying to squeeze its way through. So that's generally what we shoot for. But again, there's so many factors that influence the design type, and often it has to do with accommodating the high flows that can occur in the waterway and affect the span and other things. But two lanes we're striving to use as a replacement type as in most cases is the suitable solution.
Nancy, I'll recognize Nancy and then Nico. Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, aren't there certain ministry requirements on what roads and bridges must meet in terms of structure and use and all of that? So depending on, aren't there guidelines and requirements under the ministry requirements as well, provincial?
Yeah, there's a National Highway Bridge Design Code that has to be referred to and designed around to ensure that the code of today is these structures meet, and that has a great influence on the structural components that keep the driver safe and transfer the loads and other factors like that. That's a big, it's kind of like the decision maker structurally for these replacements. It's the Highway Bridge Design Code. And there might be others. Pat, you can maybe help me out here, but I think that's the big one.
Yeah, the Canadian Highway Bridge Design Code is what we follow structurally, and then there's also highway design standards that the Ministry of Transportation puts out and regularly updates. Standard details. I know we touched on the barrier, but all those are actually crash tested. So they have standard designs that they like you to stick to so that they know it works.
I've just got a few people on my screen. So Nico, I've got you next, but does anybody else have a question after Nico? I'm just looking now. Okay, go ahead, Nico.
In terms of, we were talking, or you had talked about a cast in place arch component such as is on the St. David Street Bridge. The difference between a bridge such as this and a bridge such as the St. David Street Bridge is that the St. David Street Bridge has the advantage of optics from outside of the bridge looking toward the bridge. So the archway makes sense because you can see it. On a bridge such as this, where there is no external viewing to the bridge, it's to the bridge component, nobody's going to see the arch. So the arch almost has to go on the inside rather than the outside, so that people can see it from their vehicles, because otherwise no one's going to see it. So that's sort of what my thinking is. And just very quickly, while I have the floor, I suppose there is absolutely no way that the current bridge can be moved to a different site. Have we already? I think we've already explored that, have we?
Yeah, I could speak to that. We did indeed have a hard look at that opportunity, and there was some real challenges with this type of idea of removing this particular structure and taking it elsewhere. One of the big issues with this one is its current state. It's very vulnerable. It's kind of just, for lack of a better term, it's hanging together there. It's safe for the 5 tons at the moment, but if we got large cranes involved in a removal to kind of preserve that structure, we'd be into perhaps it could be catastrophic in that sense. And then I had a meeting with a area contractor that's quite familiar with repairs and bowstring arches throughout his career, because he maybe wasn't the one that built them, but helped preserve them and repair them. And he had great concerns about that moving this particular one because of its integrity, and the bows would potentially fall into one another during the move. So that kind of idea was extinguished because of the feasibility issues with that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, can you perhaps give us some information then for us to use to determine then how we're going to proceed, and the timelines involved going forward from tonight? And there'll be another opportunity for us to, or perhaps if we can even send you some options in terms of what we're thinking of, or some ways that we can collaborate perhaps on this design, maybe a little more efficiently than just doing the meeting. Because we get into, I'm sure we could discuss this for another couple hours without any trouble, but I'm just wondering, so what's your timeline going forward, and what do you need from us tonight?
With regards to the information that's displayed on the commemorative plaque, I would suggest you've got a number of months. That type of information can be left with your group for, well, because of the timing window for when we can potentially get at this. We won't be able to physically remove the bridge because of fish habitat reasons until July. So, we won't even be able to remove the bridge until July. And then it's just a matter of if we can agree on perhaps the plaque size and its location, then the information that's on it can kind of be, you can take your time with. So you have months with regards to that component. But with the idea of perhaps introducing some impressions in the bridge and their location and stylings and that kind of thing, we would like to have an answer to that in the, you know, by the, I don't know, I might maybe need some help from Pat, but perhaps the end of January. Or is that reasonable, Pat? Like, what would you think on that particular aspect?
I think end of January would be good, just because if we're putting this out to contractors for them to submit a price on, they need to know what they're building. So if we're planning to do that in February, I think you need all the information end of January at the latest, I would say.
Okay, I'm just wondering, in order to determine then, you know, kind of or have some sort of choice, I'm wondering, Adam, if you could present us with something for the next meeting, and perhaps even be here at the next meeting to show us or to send us in advance something a little more, excuse the concrete, that we can perhaps start to envision what this would actually look like. And I'm not sure if you were indicating to us tonight, it looked to me like there wasn't much of a wall or a parapet wall to actually do an impression on if you're proposing a bridge with a tubular guardrail above it, or would there be the option to just do a concrete wall that would give us a little more space to do the commemorative relief?
Yeah, just to give a bit of context to the typical wall type that's structured that I had up on screen earlier, that's 700 millimeters high. That translates to be about 2'4" high. So you're right, it's not a humongous surface area to work with, but if we could look at sticking with that type of surface area, it certainly will enable us to advance the design quicker and potentially have the replacement completed next year. To get into anything beyond that is going to take a little bit more time and consideration and a little bit more funds from the budget. But what I would like to suggest to the group is that based on, you know, we know it's given the hydrology and the amount of water that has to pass through here, it's going to be a little wider than what's there currently for the large storm events. And, you know, it'll be a 10-meter span, and give a bit of perhaps a bit of a draft of what it might look like to incorporate a similar bow type to what was on the St. David Street Bridge on the interior walls, and bring that back to you to your next meeting, perhaps, if that's of interest to you, just to have something, a image, a physical, you know, layout of how that would work. But again, these are things that your group need to collaborate on as well. So maybe that we could bring that as a starting point for you, and hopefully we can work from that.
Okay. I was going to suggest that perhaps we could give you, we could work on a timeline that would allow us to make a decision at the beginning of February. So that would give us meetings. So we'd have one more meeting to collaborate and to go back and forth. And then perhaps we could give you the decision plan to try and do something for the beginning of February, which should be just a couple days into the month. I think the February meeting would be, so that would, I think, is it Tuesday the 2nd or the 9th, Devlin, of February?
Believe it would be the 9th, but I'll just check and confirm for you.
Anyway, at the latest, it would probably be the 9th. So would that work for your timeline? Pat?
It might be a bit tight, but what we think, because you guys meet again in January, is that correct?
Yeah, but we were just hoping to have a little bit more time to go
Okay.
back at least one more time.
If I can throw out maybe another option, if we come up with maybe a couple different sketches, to maybe, if you have possibly some better visuals, would it be possible to get a decision early January? If you guys have a little bit more to look at, and if we are able to provide maybe a couple options.
Okay, what's the committee think about that?
Phil, I think we should see what we're working with before we make any decision or recommendations on what it should look like, because I have no idea. I mean, I don't know if anyone else does. I don't even know what the bridge is going to look like. So I would like to see some idea of what it's going to look like so that we can move forward with some sort of recommendation for the commemoration.
Or the design? Yeah. Commemorative design. Okay. Good
I
point,
think-
Mariana.
Sorry, I think Colin had his hand up before, so I don't know if he wants to add something here, but I also think that it would be helpful to have some sketches or a preliminary design for the January meeting. And then the committee can discuss it then. There could be some ideas put forward already by that point from the designers. And then the committee, if it feels at that point maybe that it needs more information, then can request further information. But I think bringing it back in January is a good idea at this point, to at least have some schematics and some idea of what this bridge will look like and where the opportunities are for those commemorative or design pieces for the committee's consideration, and which elements are actually, 100% required and there's no wiggle room on, so to speak. So I think it would be really helpful for the committee to understand where there is some opportunity for some design feedback and where there really isn't any, and what the actual components are that need to be there for certain. And I don't know if Colin wants to add something.
Yeah, if I could, I think Mariana, that summed it up nicely. We'll bring back some sketches, as Pat mentioned, and with options that are feasible, right? That meet the Canadian Highway Bridge Design Code, but provide, incorporate the feedback that you provided this evening, and then we can have a discussion on those sketches, and maybe either some tweaks, that we can make. I was really interested in the importance of Charles Mattiani and kind of his influence on the bowstring bridges that he brought over from Italy back in the day. So there's some good information that we've received tonight, and I think we can, as a project team, take that back and come up with some ideas, bring them back to the committee in January, and hopefully have some discussion and some good discussion at that point. But this has been really useful. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Mariana, just to finish us
Sorry,
off.
just one quick question. Maybe Colin can answer this. How is the budget impacted in terms of council? Has the budget already been approved for the bridge? And then if there are any changes that need to be made, how is that approved or taken back to council, or how is that considered? It might just be helpful to understand that piece too.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the budget for 2021 isn't quite approved by council. It's been through committee of the whole. So the 10-year capital forecast has been approved, but it hasn't been finalized, got the final approval from council. So that'll be January 18th, I believe, is the date. So we have some, a little bit of flexibility to do, some the impressions within the parapet walls, for example, like we do have in the bronze plaques, like we've allotted budget for those. We haven't allotted, say, like a full, kind of decorative arches, for say, because that's getting into a lot larger expense. And so there is, I think there is some room in the budget there to incorporate some elements into the parapet walls. But yeah, there becomes a point if it's, if we're looking at it going, okay, the cost of this is getting too much, there would be a concern that, okay, we got to make sure we have enough budget before we go to tender, before we approach the contractors. Otherwise we're, yeah, of course, back to council. And yeah, so there's some context with the budget.
Okay, I think that was a good discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight. And so we'll see you back in January. And if you have anything then for us before that, we'll distribute it to the committee. And if you have any questions too for us, like by way of needing to clarify, I'm sure, Colin, you're always in touch with Mariana, so we can continue to collaborate on this. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Yep. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, so cultural heritage landscape study, that is Mariana.
Yes, thank you. So I just said by way of an update, so the cultural heritage landscape study, it wrapped up. We had a report that we delivered to council on November 30th. That's included in your package for today's agenda. And I had sent it out before that meeting as well. So it was received for information only at this point. It's a culmination of the last year and a half of work on this, as you all know. And a big thank you to Nico, Phil, and Don, who were on that committee. So the project team was basically myself and the three of them, as well as our consultants that worked extensively on providing initial information, providing the information from the Heritage Committee when we had compiled before our first session with the consultants, we had compiled a list of potential landscapes. I think there were about 19 on that list. So those were provided, and then we held a very long public consultation process, and culminating in the report, as I mentioned. So it's a lengthy report, but it's in 3 volumes. And so the first volume is sort of the bulk of the report. So I really suggest that you read through that, if anything, that it, if it sort of summarizes the whole process to date, and then the list of proposed cultural heritage landscapes, and also provides recommendations for moving forward, short, medium, and long term. And what I can do is, I was planning to give you the presentation that the consultant gave to council, but I'll shorten it up, just especially the beginning part of it, because you all know what a cultural heritage landscape is. But I will maybe go through it now, and if Devlin can put it up on the screen, then we can briefly go through it and talk about the landscapes that were finalized, basically to be candidate significant cultural heritage landscapes. And we're looking for input from council, from the public, from this committee, and from anybody who has been able to review the study and wants to provide input and comments, and looking for input by the end of January. So again, this committee, the 3 members of this committee that were on the project team were basically, speaking on behalf of the committee, but definitely we would like to hear other other people's comments if there are any. And the report has not been finalized. It's going to be finalized at the next stage once we get all the comments back and all the feedback. So I'll just go through it now. And Devlin, I guess you're going to have to forward these slides so we can go pretty quickly. But so as you all know, this project basically stemmed from a need to look at the township on a comprehensive basis and try to sort of start to prioritize which areas we would look at for further protection. And we've been doing a lot of work on the individual property basis, but we decided or determined that it was we were needing to do more work in the cultural heritage landscape area in terms of identifying larger areas that might be worthy of protection or further study for sure. So we decided that we would identify, evaluate, and inventory and map the CHLs that are potentially significant in the township, and provide recommendations for conservation and further study. So just to clarify again, this is not a document that protects these landscapes. This is a starting point. So this is doing all of the background research, all the public consultation needed to find and to really identify the landscapes. And then once we can identify them and agree on them as a community, which is what we're seeking input on, then we can move forward with them in terms of prioritization and further study, which I'll get to at the end, and I'll talk a little bit more about. So, you know, we decided to engage the community as well for sure to do this project. Next slide. So, as you know, this is the definition of a CHL, a defined geographical area modified by human activity having cultural heritage value to a community, including an Indigenous community. They can be designed, evolved, or associative. Next slide. And important to keep in mind that they involve groupings, and it's not just individual properties. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and they made that clear at all the public sessions. Next slide. We talked about spaces, corridors, and complexes, and how they contribute to the character and how they're important to the community as a whole. Next slide, please. So this was our schedule. There were 3 phases. We did, the consultants at ASI did all of the analytical framework. They developed the background research, the methodology. They held the open house and community workshops. We did historical research. They came to a final list of candidates that they brought to another open house, and we're now at the end part of the reporting and did the council presentation. Next slide, please. So these are sort of the 3 parts of the methodology: gathering information, doing the analysis, and then the final results. Next slide. I won't go through a lot of the specifics. The background research was based off of our all of our databases, our lists of listed and designated, and a lot of other research that the team did. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So they looked very specifically at the township in terms of physiography, the river, really it bisects the entire community, and they looked at patterns and what shaped the development of the community. Next slide, please. So this is, again, just looking at the physical features of the township. Next slide, please. Get forward again, please. Keep going. Just trying to get through these a little bit more quickly. Yeah, that's fine. You can keep going. So this is sort of what they looked at, a whole bunch of obviously different components. And then we took it to a public engagement and launched it on our website on Connect CW, had the public open house, which I think most of you attended, the mapping sessions. Next slide, please. and we got a lot of really good information and results from the mapping sessions and from the public engagement and comment sheets. We also had surveys. Next slide, please. The surveys, people were able to pin things on maps as well and provide their input. So we did get a considerable amount of feedback, which was very good. And we also did Indigenous engagement, and we received feedback from some of the groups and some feedback from the Six Nations as well in terms of our report, preliminary report that went to them, and we incorporated their proposed changes. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So really what was significant or important here was that they looked at the themes that we had identified, and then how those themes helped the physical features evolve in the community, and how valuable they were to the community. So that was basically the critical aspect of it. Next slide, please. And then this is something worth noting. So priority was given to larger areas, as I said, just because landscapes are considered more of a comprehensive basis with multiple properties. So there were a lot of individual features identified through some of the public information sessions and the feedback and the comments, but we were focusing more on how they relate to each other and how they form part of a larger grouping. So not to say that a lot of the things that were identified were not significant, it's just that for the purposes of this project, we were looking at them on a larger scale. So there were some features, some properties and areas identified that we might want to look at on an individual basis and add for study for designation, for example, that might be more appropriate or easier to handle that way. But there was a list developed of these as well. So we will look at those as part of our designation subcommittee and for future for this committee. Next slide, please. Next. So it's important just to note here that in order to be considered a cultural heritage landscape, a significant one, you have to have 3 components, and this is used, it's sort of starting to be a standard approach, and I think it came from Waterloo region. They've done a lot of work in this area, but it needs to have cultural heritage value or interest, it needs to have community values, and historical integrity. So it needs to still be, relatively intact and visible to the community. And the cultural heritage value or interest, as you know, comes from the Ontario regulation that helps us determine when something has value. Next slide, please. So if you can just move along, Devlin, to sort of the end where we have the list. Just jump to that. There we go. So these are the 18 that have been identified. Sorry if you could go back. There were 18 cultural heritage landscapes identified. Can you go back, Devlin? Sorry. Sorry, it's 2, I think it's 2 slides back. There we go. One more back. Okay. Yeah. One more. There we go. Okay. So I think we can just focus on, not sure what's happening there. If we can focus on that list of 18, you've probably already seen them in the report. I don't have them in front of me now, but they do identify several of the landscapes that are within the downtown areas that are in and around the Grand River. So there are separate ones there that are identified. And then there's one rural landscape identified. So can you not get to that screen, Devlin, of the 18? Not sure why it seems there. We can just stay there for a little bit. So we've got the Grand River Corridor, the Elora Cataract Trailway. It keeps moving. So I'm not gonna attempt to read them. There's the map that shows sort of the 18. The bottom right is the rural landscape, that's Austic, and they had come up with some additional criteria to determine a rural landscape. So that's some interesting reading that you can do. And what I'll say is that the 18 have been identified in the preliminary part of the report in volume 1. If you go to, I believe it's volume 3, it actually goes into very specific detail of each one. It has a map, photographs, and an explanation in terms of the values. So the 3 values that are identified in the Heritage Act and the guidelines. And you can go through the 18 to specifically understand why each is considered significant. And then there were there was prioritization done. There was the short sort of immediate higher priority ones, and then there were lower priority. So the higher priority were the ones in the urban centers where there's a little bit more threat of infill and redevelopment, were just valued much higher by the community. And then the lower priority ones, I'm not sure if you can bring those up, Devlin. They were more the ones that are already somewhat protected. So the slide that just says higher priority and lower priority. The lower priority already are either owned by public authorities or are just more in a rural area, so there's less of a risk. So these are the ones considered of higher priority, and these are the lower priority. So this presentation is available online and I think was part of the package. So if you don't have it, I can send it to you and it'll help you understand the results of the study. And then there were some short, medium, and long-term recommendations made. The shorter term recommendations are basically for council to adopt or endorse the study and the sites that were identified. And then what we would be looking at is once we go back to council, council would endorse the study, and then we're looking at probably putting, there are a few options, and we will be discussing that in a future report in terms of where to go from here. And we can, for example, add these to a schedule in the official plan that would basically identify them as significant. We could create official plan policies that speak to some of these, and then also design guidelines. We could prioritize, we will be prioritizing certain ones for further study and whether they can be potential heritage conservation districts. And then in terms of priority, what we would take them to council and ask for future further studies, and that would come with obviously funding requirements and budget requests to council. So that's just a general overview of how we got to where we did and the final 18 sites. And then we're looking again to the public to get a sense of, I should add that there were preliminary sites that were presented at that January open house, and they did modify a few of the sites, particularly I would say the downtowns. So the Elora and Fergus downtown areas, those were modified from what was originally proposed based on public feedback, based on additional research. So the public process did work very well in terms of trying to get the nuances recognized in there in those sites and areas and boundaries. But these are preliminary boundaries, so nothing is finalized. This is just sort of the preliminary take on exactly how we will be looking at these in the future, and then we can do further studies to further refine the boundaries. So that's the general overview, and I can answer questions if anyone's got any questions, and would also maybe look to Phil to see how if there's any feedback that needs to come from this committee, or if anyone wants to make any feedback or provide any feedback, it can come to our next meeting in January, and we can discuss it as well as a group, because we're looking for final comments, I guess, before the end of January. So the 29th, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, perhaps, are there any specific questions for Mariana right now? And go ahead, Nico.
Just in terms of the technical study process, Mariana, can you enlighten us a little bit about what that looks like, who participates in that, what you perceive the outcome of that to be, that kind of thing?
Right, sure. So when we look at further studies, we're mostly looking, I would say at this point, at heritage conservation district studies. So that's sort of one example, and it's probably the primary one. So we could take either the Fergus or Elora area that the village cores, or any of the areas around there, and study them for future. So there's sort of a prescribed process when you do a heritage conservation district study, for example, where you first have to develop a study area and a bylaw, and that establishes a set of boundaries. And I know that we had a lot of discussions on these boundaries with the consultants, and we chose to have the largest, I'd say, boundary possible that takes into account all the values and the properties that people considered significant, so that it's always much easier to hone in and to fine tune and to narrow your search than it is to expand and try to add something you missed. So we did err on the side of caution of trying to be inclusive, and that's why you'll see both of those boundaries have increased in size generally, the village core boundaries to encompass the residential areas. So for further technical studies, we'd look at first establishing a boundary area, and then the study itself is done. So it generally would be a consultant that would come in, a consulting group, and study the area, the features of it, the individual properties, determine which would be in or out, or basically what policies they would have, and the properties that are included, the properties that are excluded. And then once you establish the research, and I have not been through this process, so I'm not 100% sure of exactly how it works. It's a very long and iterative process, but you do get to a stage 2 or a phase 2, which is the actual guidelines that would be developed. So once the area and the specific properties are identified within a boundary, an HCD, then you would go to the next stage, which would be development of the design or the actual prescriptive guidelines. So those guidelines would specifically state what one can and can't do in that boundary. And what the prescribed process would be for people to make alterations, for example. So they're not as simple as just protecting an area. They do come with legislative requirements under, let's say, the Ontario Heritage Act, if you're doing a heritage district. And once you establish the boundary, it is also appealable. So there's certain prescribed requirements and timelines and appeal mechanisms, and then confirmation, and then you move to the next stage. So it's quite it could be quite a lengthy process for each individual site if we're going towards a heritage conservation district. There are other CHLs that are not as, let's say, extensive, not as complicated. There could be some that are, for example, the Allen Farmstead was identified, and that could be as simple as an individual designation as a CHL. So it's got clearly identified boundaries and values, similar to how we treated Templin Gardens, for example. So it could be identified as a cultural heritage landscape, and you just identify each individual component that forms part of that, and it's protected in that sense. So there's opportunities for various methods and various technical studies, and each one would be slightly different. I hope that helps answer that question.
Okay, so if you're looking for more feedback from the group, from the committee, then I'd suggest that perhaps we could, having read it, forward your questions to Mariana, so that you can have an opportunity to sort of have a look at them and then come back with responses for the next meeting. Is that something we could do?
I think that would be helpful. And I also suggest, and I'm just thinking this through, it would probably, since Heritage Center Wellington functions as an advisory committee to council, and maybe Councillor Van Leeuwen can comment on this, since you're acting as the advisory committee, I wonder if it would be helpful at some point for the committee to perhaps make an endorsement of the study or the report, or suggestions if you feel that's appropriate, so that you're going to council with your recommendation on this report and whether it should be endorsed or not. I know that, you know, several of you have been on the working committee, but as a group, I think it would be helpful to have some sort of endorsement that does go to council when it goes forward.
Yeah, sorry. I definitely think it's good for the committee to have an endorsement, that they've gone through it, that they, especially it is the Heritage Committee. So I would recommend that for sure.
What would the timing on that be, Marianne?
So I'm looking for comments by end of January. I foresee probably taking this to council at the earliest would be in March. So March or April, it would be like late spring. Sorry, late winter, maybe early spring. So if we could have another discussion about it, if there's any questions in January, maybe by February to have some sort of endorsement. Just, I'd want a sense maybe of public feedback. There could be some changes made, and those would be sort of vetted through the project team. So that Nico, Phil, and Don sit on anyway. But we could take any comments from the public and sort of consolidate them and discuss them as a group in February, and then see if we can get some sort of endorsement from the committee, hopefully in February, if that works.
Right, so we'll have have a read through if you haven't done so already, and if something occurs to you, forward it to Mariana. You can take those questions up at our January meeting with the thought of once we've got all the public input, we can do perhaps an endorsement in February. Everybody.
Yeah, and the January meeting is quite early, I think. So if people haven't had a chance to get through it by our January meeting, that's fine. Like, we still have till the end of January
Sure.
to submit comments. But if there's any preliminary questions or anything we need to discuss, we can do that in January, and then we can also do that in February.
Okay, thank you very much, Mariana. And they're not here, but the project team who did a great job, like the ASI group. Devlin, do we need a little? I'd like to try and just finish off. We've got two more things to discuss, I think, on the agenda, and maybe some subcommittee work. Having missed October, would we be okay with extending perhaps up to 30 minutes the meeting? Is that something, do we need a motion for that, Devlin, or just consensus?
That's just up to the committee members.
Would the committee be okay with that? Steve?
Sorry, I have an overlapping meeting that started at 7:30, but I'll, if I can step out now, then you can continue with those last two items.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
That's fine. You're excused. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Yeah, and season's greetings, I guess. Anyway, is everyone else okay with that? I don't want to waste your time, but if we're good, if you're not good, let me know. Okay, so the next item was we've got, thank you, Mariana, for that. You really did a good job summarizing that for us, so I appreciate that. And I'm just going to flip over to my agenda here. So the next item is the Heritage Awards nominations. And I just wondered, Nancy, have you got any feedback from anybody? Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, I haven't received anything back as far as I'm aware, and I haven't had a chance to talk with Jean, but it kind of overlaps with our timelines. When I think about last year, because we didn't have a December meeting, we kind of ran out of time for Heritage Week, and Heritage Awards are all part of that. But having said that, I don't know what COVID impact's going to be on Heritage Week, and that's in February. So we only have January and then February for that. I look at, you know, we had kind of a timeline last year where, like, we had a plan for how we identify the properties, developing the categories, you know, getting involved with the property owners, what marketing we were going to do, and like Dawn and Mariana and, you know, you guys all did the radio spots. So I kind of had resurrected that and shared it at our last meeting in terms of a time and action plan for our public relations committee. And I know this overlaps with your next agenda item for the committees, but if I may, I would look for input in terms of what is the impact of COVID going to be on this Heritage Week, and have we run out of time in terms of what we had planned to do last year, and that kind of projected, well, we'll do it in 2021, right? I mean, I'm just trying to get some directive, because a lot of it is staff work that was, you know, projected to be done last year, in terms of, you know, all the marketing and you know, all of that as well. So I'm just kind of looking for directions in terms of what is the will of the committee in terms of COVID, like, and what are we practically going to be able to do?
Any comments, Mariana?
Well, I would say it's been very challenging, even just from a workload perspective for me. With this project, with the CHL study and, you know, just a few other projects, and people now, especially at the end of the year, trying to get their planning approvals and building permits in place. I have not been able to dedicate the, you know, the time or the resources to that. So my apologies for that, for sure. But also I think in the, you know, with the uncertain environment and not having the ability to, you know, present people like we did last year with their awards, and have the media out and have sort of the photo op. We could still try, we could do something even in this forum, but I mean, I'll leave it to the committee to decide what they want to do. I will just put a suggestion out there to say that we could maybe forego the event this year. Or just have one or two awards that we could present. We could send a media release, and we could still try to do some things. But if we do decide to proceed, I would suggest that we just, we really try to keep it manageable, and maybe something a little bit smaller than what we had anticipated. And I know, like you, Nancy, you and Jean did a great job in trying to provide, you know, award categories and a great way to move forward. And then, you know, we were hit with this situation. So it's unfortunate, but I'm just not sure, you know, I'm not sure what is the best approach here. So I'll leave it to the committee.
And I was going to ask, like, I haven't had any feedback from anybody in terms of, are there any specific properties that you would really like to see get recognition this year, in terms of, because of course, I'm not aware, but if others are properties that haven't already been identified, you know, that would be good.
I think that was, if I can, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I think that was part of our challenge when we started discussing all the categories. Was we had, I think the sense was that there wasn't too many, like there weren't too many that we that easily came to mind. So, you know, that's just sort of another one of the factors that leads me to think that maybe it just might be better to put it off, or to try to you know, lessen the scale of it a little bit.
Did I hear correctly, Beverly mention February as a month for when she was talking about her award?
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, instead of just a Heritage Week, they were looking at a month. So is there an impact or opportunity with her association or the tourism people or somebody that we could piggyback or just work with to do something to recognize rather than lose it altogether?
Yeah. February is Heritage Month, and Family Day typically is where Heritage Day falls. So there's some opportunity. I'm not going to say there isn't, but we did a lot last year. We had the CHL study sort of coming to the public in January, and we used, as you said, media. Like we went to the radio stations and we did some, you know, just a lot of work in that respect. We still have the opportunity to do social media work and publicize things. But again, I don't know if properties easily come to mind. I know that we did have an idea to nominate some members of the community for the work that they're doing, but I'm not sure if you know, we want to put that on hold or not.
Yeah, if we can't really come up with properties, is there something else we could take the opportunity to do? And I noticed in one of the suggestions last year that there was going to be Nico, I think, had thought of or suggested, you know, doing something about what is it the committee does and what is it that Heritage Week means, you know, even just if it's a marketing thing, to still keep the committee and Center, you know, the Center Wellington in the forefront of people that heritage is important. And even though we may not have awards due to COVID, we wanted to educate. And I'm sorry if I'm speaking the turn, Nico, but I just saw a note that, you know, it is like, what do we do? Why is it important? And it was all kind of part and parcel of an education piece.
Nico?
Well, I mean, if we wanted to really focus on the CHL, some of the timeframes that Mariana had proposed fall in line with Heritage, with February. So even if we took the cultural heritage landscape study as being the issue that we'd like to highlight during Heritage Week or during February, then maybe if we can make the endorsement, do the recommendation to council, and make that a sort of a PR kind of thing, then maybe we can just simply use what's at hand that we've already talked about and simply highlight that.
I think that's actually quite a good idea, rather than trying to divvy up our energy in several different ways. I think the cultural heritage landscape has the potential to be really an important, something very important that we've done. And so bringing it to the public's attention in a different way through the Heritage Week, Heritage Month, I think that's a good idea. So is that, and we have a lot of the groundwork is laid for that. So it would just be a question of perhaps thinking about how we could best publicize it for Heritage Week.
Yeah. Can I add something there, Phil? So
Yep.
the study was very well received by council. I'm not sure if any of you watched the meeting. It was very well received. There was a lot of positive comment, and one of the counselors even suggested it should be part of the school curriculum. So because there's so much information and it's very well laid out in the report that it talks about just, you know, how the township evolved and developed. So all the themes are there, the relevant dates and people, and it's a really interesting piece of work. It's, you know, I just think there might be some opportunity there, as you said, to publicize it a little bit more. The timing is a little bit, because comments are requested by end of January. Once we go into February, it hasn't been endorsed by council yet and hasn't been there yet, but perhaps the Heritage Committee may have endorsed it by then. And so you're right, we can use that Heritage Committee and that week to say the Heritage Committee has just endorsed this study, or whatever the case may be at that point, and then do something like that to help on social media, to help talk about Heritage Week. And we can do a little media release as well that talks about Heritage Week, the work of the Heritage Committee, and then that the fact that you know, this cultural heritage landscape study is in the works and has gone to the community and is going to council soon. So it's a good opportunity for that. I agree. So I can work on, I can work on that with Kendra and with maybe the education subcommittee, or
we could also, I'm just thinking, you know, if we actually publicize the cultural heritage landscapes that we have identified, and then that could be some sort of a, you know, sort of take them out of the report, so that then people can be, you know, something we could just print the landscapes in the
actually
paper.
You just reminded me of something that's actually very exciting. The consultants have worked on what's called the story map, and you'll remember the story map that Greg worked on in terms of our designated and listed properties and how they come up. We were just having some trouble with the number of properties we have, but they've also developed something very similar for this study that I just received. So we're going to be publicizing that, and that's an excellent tool because it's very animated. You scroll down and it actually provides a map and pictures and some wording. So it goes through this whole study, but in a very easy to understand way. And that's something that we can send out that link and send that out to the public and publicize it even more during that week.
Sure. And we could, you know, even to the point of suggesting people that would be something they could do with their family, visit some of the cultural, you know, go for a walk on the Trestle Trail, you know, go by the Allen Farm, maybe don't go on it, but, you know, and just make people aware, and then they become sort of a destination interactive process where people can go out and view these areas.
And just to piggyback, Nancy, on what you were saying in terms of an earlier suggestion that I might have made about what it is that we do and that kind of thing. We, you know, we could also incorporate. I mean, we've done, as a Heritage Committee, have done a lot of work in terms of making this happen, and so I mean that can be highlighted too in terms of the role that we've played as a committee in terms of bringing this this project forward.
I like the suggestions because I just would hate to lose the opportunity to promote the committee and the work that's done by staff and the committee in terms of heritage, because I'm part of on Facebook, there's a group, and there's been some comments with regard to, you know, the roles and the evolution of the areas, and we're losing this and that. And my response has always been, you have opportunities to, you know, volunteer on the committee or have input. You can dial in, you know, even with COVID, there's still meetings. So I really like the idea that you folks have provided in terms of doing something to market that it's alive and well. And even with COVID, there's still, staff are still working hard, the committee's still involved, there's still opportunity for input. Here's what you can do. I just love the visual in that report in terms of all of the 18 properties. I just think I'm a visual learner. So to me, seeing something like that is stunning. And it just kind of encompasses all of the different aspects of what's involved in our community. So I really like the opportunity to, instead of saying, well, we're not going to have the awards, we don't even have to say that, but in terms, let's do something to really promote how wonderful it is to live in this area, because I think that report is just incredible. Well done.
Okay. Well, why don't we continue to collaborate on that then during the month? I just wondered, is this something that perhaps we should consider another radio spot? Maybe Don, what do you think of that?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now we can. You just
Yeah.
had a little freeze up.
Yeah, I had my headphones on and that. So that might be doable. That they do a very different show than because of the situation we're in now. So it's much more like you phone in kind of idea, right? So that's sort of how they're operating it.
Sure.
I could use my contacts and reach out to them to see if they're interested. If we had some dates in mind, would probably be the best. Particularly if we're looking at timelines now, probably somewhere like if we give them a good month or maybe 2 months ahead of time, if we have a date in mind, if we're going to have a public hearing or if it's so on. So that would be helpful.
All right, why don't we collaborate on that in the next few days then, and talk to Mariana, and then we can give you some times.
Yeah, that would be great. Then that's easier to go to them with that.
Okay.
I had another idea too, because in terms of these awards that we give out, I'm almost thinking because we don't have properties, and I don't know how appropriate it is, but is it possible to give an award to, like, say, ASI for all the work that they did to create this? I know they got paid for it, but is it worth recognizing all of their efforts and putting the whole CHL together?
I don't know. I think that would be something that might be better for 2021.
Yeah,
to do something like that.
Once it's all finalized.
Yeah, I think it might be a little jumping the gun, but I had a couple of people and a property that I had in mind for the awards, but maybe, and my concern with people is if we start discussing it openly, I felt like there might need to be some confidentiality in terms of discussing awards for volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to sort of, so maybe that's something I could talk to Nancy about just on the side, and she could give me some ideas about that, because I do have some concerns about if you brought 2 or 3 individuals as nominees, then there'd have to be some open discussion about that. And that's a little different in my mind anyway than discussing a property.
And there's also some properties that we've seen, they're in development now, that certainly look like they'd be great categories in the coming year or two. So
that's it. And I also had the one property that come to mind for me was the library in Fergus and the work that had been done there. And I had even looked at the categories that Nancy provided and thought about for community access to the building and the way that access had been developed. So I thought that would be a very specific award. But maybe what I could do is send that to you, Nancy, and then if we think there's anything there that we could include for Heritage Week, we could do that, or just defer it to next year.
And to Don's point earlier about the photography in the report being done by the Connors, maybe Beverly, I don't know, it depends, I guess, on where that project goes, but maybe there's something we could do to highlight that photography to kind of dovetail. But she did talk about it being in the fall, so I'm not sure.
Sure.
I got a little confused in timing for her, so.
Yeah, I think the actual, I think in the fall is when they're talking about putting these photographs on display.
I wonder if we're not going to have any nominations per se. I really do like the idea of community-based nominations, and I wonder if during Heritage Week we might be able to put something out there to say, look, if you have any if you have anything in mind or any projects in mind or any, in terms of, who would be somebody that you would like to see being honored, then let us know.
Yeah, so you're suggesting introducing the idea that there would be a public nomination
Simply by way of
process.
introduction, yeah.
Which, okay, well, that's something, maybe we can work on that, on the details of that, and then, figure out when that would open up. I had some ideas for Nancy too, in terms of perhaps there could be a form that people could fill out so that their nominee or nomination would be standardized. Some people don't have heritage language that they know how to use, but I'm just wondering, Nancy, if that's something we could do. So awkward using this format. Yeah, I'm just wondering, Nancy, if there was something we could do in terms of a form.
Oh, sure. We can work on that, and I can talk to Jean as well. She may have some ideas
Yeah.
too.
Well,
So
my thinking on that was, if people are going to do nominations, many of them won't have, this would give them a basic format they could follow to submit their nomination. So that everything would kind of be on equal footing.
sure.
Okay. And along with, so we'll is this something we can collaborate on then again via email and come back to the January?
I think we can
meeting?
do that as a subcommittee. We can
All
work
right.
on that. The education subcommittee can move that forward, and we can collaborate on that for sure.
And
Okay.
certainly if any of the other committee members have recommendations based on discussions tonight that come to mind, feel free to send them to me. I'd be happy to look at them. That'd be great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nancy. Maybe we'll call that the Education Subcommittee Communication Report then, from our agenda item as well. We've got one other item to get to before we get there, and that's the appointment of a Healthy Growth Advisory Committee alternate. Has anybody, Mariana, do you want to give a quick synopsis of what that is, or summary?
Sure. There's a committee, Healthy Growth Committee, that was recently struck, I guess, this past year by the mayor. And it's really just to discuss and collaborate on ideas for establishing a healthy growth mandate in the township. And items come to the committee, such as, how to achieve attainable housing, how to protect the community. So there's been quite a bit that's come to that. The urban design guidelines have come to the committee for comment. So it's really a group of community representatives that discuss that issue. Jean has been the representative from this committee. So the terms of reference indicate that one member of Heritage Center Wellington should be on that committee. And Jean has been the representative. And we thought that it would be helpful to have an alternate in case she can't attend. She wasn't able to attend the last meeting, and then we thought that it might be good to appoint an alternate. So I don't know if Devlin or Carrie have some comments there, but on the
I think you
process.
summed it up very well. But if this is something that maybe committee isn't sure about just yet, you can take the time to think about it. We can make the decision next month.
Okay, I think that's a good idea at this point. Unless anybody would like to, come forward and volunteer for that position now.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, there we go. Fantastic. So Nico, I'll just let you can either talk to Jean or Devlin or whatever, in order to, if there's anything you need to do.
I can send you an update, Nico.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we need to do anything here, or we can just agree that that's what's happened?
If you can do that by consensus.
Okay. So By consensus then, Nico will be the alternate for the Healthy Growth Advisory Committee. All in favor of that then? And I think we have consensus. Good. Thank you, Nico. That's wonderful. Okay, one thing we got big check mark on. So for the subcommittee, subcommittees reports, we've got public relations and education. Did you have anything to add then, Nancy, or are you happy with what we were just talking about? You're good? Sorry, I missed that. Nancy?
Sorry, all good. Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
Thanks.
and then, sorry, I'm just having to flip back and forth here. We've got a designated property subcommittee. Any comments on designations?
It's been so difficult to really do much during this COVID time and reduced winter hours and that kind of thing. And so I think at some point, Sherry, we should probably get together or in whatever format and develop some kind of strategy in terms of how we want to move forward.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the nature of our situation right now. So totally understand, and I think we need to just work where we're able to be efficient and get things done without creating too many situations. Okay, so you can continue to work on that and wherever and report back at some point, Nico. Thank you. And as far as the register subcommittee, yeah, I got out. We got the maps going, and Bellwood is done. Finished off where Mariana, started up where Mariana finished off. So that small section of the map's done, and we have a new map loaded, so we can continue. Don and Nanette, if you guys want, if you're interested in picking up the equipment or doing a section, just let me know, and we can carry on with that. The leaves are
Probably
down.
do some, Phil. I'll probably do some over the holidays.
Sure.
With my daughters, they really enjoyed it, so I think I'll just use that and
Yeah, it was
try to
fun.
go
Okay, I went over to
it's really a great way to see the township and to get to know it. I don't get out there as much as I would like to, so I'll definitely be doing that if the equipment's available.
Okay, it's all ready, and like I said, the map's loaded. There's a little bit left after we do this map, but we'll be like about 85% of the way there, I think. So, and if
So
Dawn
I'll
and
probably pick that up from you then maybe next week sometime if
Sure.
you don't.
It's ready to
mind.
go right now, or I can drop it off too. Yeah. either way.
Perfect.
Okay. Great. Is that it? Yeah, we would normally do a healthy growth update at this point, advisory committee update, but I don't think Jean isn't here. She didn't pass anything along, but was there anything from that meeting?
As I said, it was just the last meeting we did the attainable housing strategy. We reviewed that strategy from the county, and if anyone's interested, the agenda and all that information is online. So that's the first Wednesday of every month, and the last couple of months we've had meetings. So if you're interested in learning more about the housing strategy, and now there's just this push to allow these additional dwelling units, one in a house, one outside of a house, and that's been approved now by the County of Wellington, coming down from the province, and we are going to be putting in place our own regulations from a zoning perspective to implement that as well. So we'll be seeing more ability for people to add an additional dwelling unit or two on their property. And it does impact this committee because in the heritage areas, it's particularly challenging, but also, in my opinion, a much more beneficial approach to densification and adding units within the urban centers, because it's just it's a gentle approach, a gentler way of doing it, where you're just adding 1 or 2 units on a property rather than, you know, putting an apartment building at a corner. And it helps you to maintain the character of areas a little bit better. And then also, you know, in conjunction with our CHL study and where we're going with that, and hopefully starting to prioritize some areas, they should all work together and to try to get, you know, a way to establish character of certain areas and try to protect that character while still allowing density to happen. So I don't think the approach is to not allow density to protect a neighborhood. I think it's to allow it to be done in the right way. And so taking into account, you know, design guidelines and heritage, while allowing people, because really the reality is it allows people to maintain their heritage homes to give them additional income. There's a lot of very large, you know, homes that are expensive to maintain. And sometimes it's just difficult for people to do that. And especially people who want to stay in their home for a long period of time, it gives them that additional income and does help. I think it helps indirectly, it helps heritage conservation.
Okay, that's some excellent comments there to close out the meeting. Thank you, Marianne. Well, I guess that completes our meeting for tonight and also for this year meeting schedule. The next meeting, I believe, is January 12th. Is that correct, Evelyn? Yeah, sorry. You're nodding, so I guess it is. Yeah.
I believe so. Let me just have a quick look.
Yeah, Carrie's nodding as well.
12th.
Okay. Yeah. Well, just to mention it, I know you'll send us an update on it. So with mind, I guess we can adjourn the meeting. Do we need anybody to, yeah, meeting adjourned. And thank you, Devlin. And
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Have a nice holiday. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, everyone
Yeah.
take care. See you.
yeah, it's been a weird year. Hopefully 2021 will behave itself. Yeah, happy holidays, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you, Carrie.
Merry Christmas,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, you too.